Yep, believe your ears, the Upload VR Gamescast is back. It's been a couple of weeks. Sorry about that, everyone. Life's hard. Many things are happening all the time. I'm Jamie Feltham, your host. With me is another great host, the one, the only Harry Baker. How you doing?
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back. It's nice to be here. Lots of stuff to discuss. There's been so many things we've done in the last few weeks that I'm itching to talk about.
We've got a lot to catch up on, but first of all, a discovery I made just this very second. Do you realize that the meta avatars watch your hand if you move them? If you move your hand in front of it, that's so strange.
Oh, they do. Yeah, I can kind of. Although it's not as reliant. I feel like yours was.
It's kind of like.
It's a bit weird when it happens, isn't it?
You can fake eye tracking right now if you just hold up your index finger and just move it in front of your head.
Fingers. Just use your fingers.
There you go, everyone. We're already in the future.
Yep.
Well, great content like that is why you come to this podcast, especially if you're on audio. I'm sure that made loads of sense. And speaking of people that come to our podcast, we would love to thank our members, Alan Gray, Anthony Mann Wexford, Robert Canonas ×2, Handy Panama, Daniel Bowen, Jerome Houston, Andrew King, Skiva007, Sexy Bicycle, Matthew May, Rick Tet, 360 Pickable, Smash Reality, Adam Hartswell, the Absolute Boy, and John Westra. Thank you so much for being here and enjoying this with us. Before we do any news, it's time to hit our most important and newest of recurring segments, Bad Metaverse Watch.
Here we go.
I purposefully left this off the running order to surprise Harry.
I love the surprise Bad Metaverse Watch. Give it to me.
Harry,
what is it?
Harry, for the sake of the audio listeners, please describe the image that's about to come onto the screen.
What am I... Oh, okay. So I did see this on the images, and I was like, "What is that?" So this is where do I start with this? The text in a big green thick text says Snoop Dogg's avatars 10K collection, and then the sandbox, whatever that is, and there is a pixelated, what I believe must have to be Snoop Dogg. However,
he doesn't look especially Snoop, does he?
He doesn't look very Snoop there, no. Although there are some plants behind him that perhaps indicate something. But what is this, Jamie? Give me more of an explanation of this image.
What we've got going on here is, and I've only taken from the first paragraph of this trash heap, is the Sandbox is releasing a collection of 10,000 programmatically generated Snoop Dogg avatar NFTs.
10,000.
The doggies. They're called the doggies. On screen now, we have 6 of the doggies.
I recognize the third doggy because he's on the cover of the What's My Name Snoop Doggy Dogg album.
Oh right, okay. Because I was going to say that's just a dog.
That's a Snoop Dogg. That is a Snoop Dogg. I don't recognize the rest of them. I'm not the biggest Snoop Dogg person, but I recognize that. The rest I have no clue.
Yeah, we have Snoop Dogg as an astronaut. We have Snoop Dogg as a robot.
These do not look like Snoop Dogg. Let's be real.
Well, the mushroom certainly isn't Snoop Dogg.
The mushroom is not Snoop Dogg.
I'm just misinterpreting.
What's the second one? Is it
Golden Idol Snoop Dogg? It's got boxing shorts on.
Yeah, no clue. Looks a bit like an Echo VR Snoop Dogg in the fourth one there.
Oh, he does, doesn't he? Each doggy is unique, so that's 10,000 ways to look uniquely cool when you style your way through the metaverse.
Wow.
With your new doggy avatar, you can attend events and concerts, play games, hang out with friends, and explore the metaverse like a boss. The avatars will be playable with the upcoming Sandbox Alpha Season 2. I probably shouldn't have had that last sentence in there because it looks like I'm doing promotional work now. Don't do this. Whatever this is, don't do it.
No, go out and buy all 10,000. Every single one. It's just a set, right? Do you get all 10,000? Is that how it works?
I don't know. It's probably
is it like you get like $10 and you get 10,000 Snoop Dogg avatars?
It's like those Lego minifigures that they put in like sealed bags, so you don't know what's going to happen.
I'm a sucker for those, though. I'm a sucker for those. Yeah. Stand there filling them up. Like which one is Dumbledore? Trying to figure out which one has the beard in it.
Keep going with it. Metaverse creators, you're really paving the way forward for a clean, sustainable future that we all want to be a part of.
It's just a shame that I've only recognized one of them. The rest, unless Snoop Dogg fans, please correct me, don't really recognize them as Snoop Dogg avatars or things from Snoop Dogg albums. Not that I'm super well versed, but wow.
There was a YouTube video explaining it a bit more, but after the great Foo Fighters outage of a couple of weeks ago, where Dave Grohl kicked us off the air for about 10 minutes, I'm not willing to risk it.
Yeah,
So
understandable.
we'll leave it there. Next up, before we get into proper news, I'd like to take a little time to talk about something, a bit of a change at UploadVR this week. We launched some new review labels. And here they are.
Look at those graphics.
If you followed us for these are good graphics. I'm
They
quite
are.
proud of myself.
Well done, yeah.
It was a well, actually, to be fair,
Team
it was
effort, but
collaboration, an
yeah,
NFT,
yeah.
if you will.
Yes. We're selling these for $10,000 each. No, joking, we're not.
There's 10,000 variants of them. If you've been following Upload review scores for the past couple of years, so if you've been a reader for a long time, first of all, thank you very, very much. I don't know why you stuck around this long, but good on you. For the longest time, we did out of 10, just like everyone else. So, well, basically that just ends up being like most games get between like a 6 to 10. Then we moved to kind of like a 5-star scale, kind of recognizing that VR isn't just about gaming, but also, movies and experiences and productivity. And maybe a 5-star scale would represent that better. Stuck with that for a couple of years now. And this week, we are moving to something a bit more, I like to think a bit more radical, but it's actually similar to some other sites you might have seen out on the web. So Eurogamer take the system. And what we have is 3 main categories, or 3 main labels, I should say, which are essential for the very, very, very best stuff. Recommended for stuff we really, really like, has some problems, but we think pretty much anyone that picks it up is probably going to enjoy it. And right at the end here, on Harry's side, there's avoid for the absolute trash heap stuff that, please God, don't spend your money on it. Obviously, there's a big gap between recommend and avoid, and there's a 4th category for that in our system. It's just unlabeled, and that's kind of meant to recognize the fact that when you don't particularly vibe with a game or every single part of a game to the point where you can't just say to anyone, I recommend this game, but there are still going to be people that are fans of certain genres or fans of certain brands and IP and developers. They're probably still going to get some level of enjoyment out of it. This is our way of kind of recognizing that and not saying this game is a 2 and it's a 2 for everyone. Or it's just okay and it's just okay for everyone. It's kind of meant to be this acknowledgement of this kind of gray area that reviews have existed in for the longest time about, well, do you pick this score or that score? And I think it's a good way of giving us a bit more confidence in trying to say what we want to say and put more weight on our words. I don't know what you think about that.
No, I agree. And I think, too, the way to think of it as well is like when you game reviews aside, if you have friends and you're recommending them any game, be it VR or otherwise, you just know that some games you're going to recommend to some people and some you're not to others because you know the type of things that your friends like or whatever. There's games that I've gone, I want to recommend this to X person because I know they like this kind of game, right? And I feel like that's why you have that kind of non-label. Read the review, you'll understand what is going on here, who this is targeted at, or who will like it, or at least like get a better idea of what's involved with the game, why it's kind of in that thing, and then you can make a decision yourself, which I think is actually how, even when I read game reviews for like, flat screen games, it's kind of how I approach it anyway. It's like I'm reading the review and I go, okay, I think this is a style of game. I'm getting this from the review, regardless of the score. That's just kind of how I approach it. So I think I agree. I think it gives us a bit more confidence to be like, there's the experiences that lots of people will probably get something out of, especially with VR too, because sometimes there's those games where you just go, wow, this is so different, or even like a VR movie or experience, not a game so much. You go, wow, everyone can get something out of this. They'll kind of learn something about the genre. Whereas then there's the things where it's like, well, this is doing some interesting stuff, but it also is held back by this. If you like that interesting stuff so much, you want to go kind of try it anyway, then it might be for you. So no, I think this is a really good kind of a good way of representing that. I think that's always been the case anyway of how we've at least thought of stuff, but it's just that this is easier for us to kind of, label it that way.
Yeah. I think, reviewing, the thing is, like, before I came to Upload, obviously I worked at like a bunch of smaller sites that eventually got me this job, but that was still working with traditional bigger games. And you would have it's a very different thing reviewing normal games as opposed to VR games, because the industry, let alone the material you're actually reviewing, the industry is just so much tighter and smaller, and it doesn't work the same way that you get given an Assassin's Creed game to review, you go away and critique it, and it just goes out there, and you don't think about it again. Often with VR reviewing, you've worked pretty closely with whoever might have developed the game in the first place to get a code for the game, organize coverage for the game, and it's a smaller, more personal industry. And I think because of that, especially right now, you need more personalized, attentive reviewing
Yeah,
that really does try and dial in on, please pay attention to these words and
totally.
not this score that's going to contribute to some stupid metaverse metacritic
Yeah,
like bonus structure or something like that.
yeah.
um
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm excited to see how this goes. I've been pushing for this for a long time.
And I think the
And
only thing I would say on it, sorry to interrupt you, was that
no, go.
um, a lot of stuff is very experimental because it kind of has to be. And there's stuff that we're still figuring out. The rules of this medium are not set in stone yet. So it doesn't really work so much to be like, well, we've got a scale out of 5 or 10 because everything works to this scale. Things just don't work that way yet. There are some things that are, very clearly trying something new, and that means some of it, it's something I'll talk about later with VVR2, but sometimes it gets some things right and other things wrong, and you don't want to kind of go, in that case, it would feel weird for me to say avoid, because it doesn't feel like something people should avoid. There are things that are genuinely good about it, or that even are beneficial to the industry slash kind of genre or our understanding of what works best. So yeah, I think similar to what you were saying, it's kind of like, well, you've got to also understand that sometimes something can do one thing really good that is a lesson that everyone should kind of pay attention to moving forward. But that doesn't mean that the rest of it is equally as good, or we're still writing the rules here in terms of what works and what doesn't. So yeah,
So I think we've put out 2 reviews since we launched the system, which, as you said, one is your VVR2 review update after a review in progress a couple of weeks ago. We'll touch on that in a second. I guess I should also talk about HitchHiker, which was a game that released last week and is something that I took the time to review this week. And I do think, we're talking about these experimental games that are hard to pin down, hard to really assign an arbitrary number or something to, because it is just so give or take depending on what you're into. And there are so many different interesting ideas executed to varying levels of success. And so I think it was a good week to launch this, because I think we have 2 of those in VVR and HitchHiker. HitchHiker is on this. It's a game that originally came to flat screens. It was on Apple Arcade, and then it came to PC and console. And it's a narrative-driven experience in which you sit as a hitchhiker in the passenger seat of 5 different vehicles, trying to piece some aspects of your past together, because you've lost your memory, and there's a kind of memento aspect to it of some of these characters you're talking to are filling in a bit more of your past. Maybe they know a bit more about you than you initially realize. Between chapters, you're going to see little flashbacks that are going to start to piece together for you what happened. And it's a really interesting experiment in narrative and conversations with NPCs, and reusing an environment in very atmospheric, recurring, and interesting ways. And I think it's one of those things where if I had played this game on a flat screen and just taken in the really nice visuals, but also been able to have the ability to, look elsewhere, go get a drink, talk to someone else
yeah,
that's hanging out in the room with me, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more than I enjoyed it in VR, because unfortunately, something you're going to talk about this again in a bit, but something that we talk about time and time again is just like VR storytelling has to be brief and witty and interactive and have
Yeah.
purpose. And this
Yeah.
is 5 40-minute chapters that
That's a lot.
aren't especially well developed for VR. Like, even though everything in the car is in with arm's reach, it's all like point and click, and then you get like a little inventory menu to spin items around and stuff. So it's not like physically reaching out and grabbing stuff. And you already feel kind of limited. You have like a dialogue tree that's like here, even though the person you're talking to is off to your left. So you're always like looking back and forth, and the conversation like pauses and isn't very natural. It looks nice on this trailer we're showing right now because it's the PC version, but on Quest 2, these environments are kind of bland, stale, repetitive,
Yeah.
have a lot of technical hiccups. And I hate going over the trite stuff when it comes to interesting indie experiments. And I try not to let that get in my way as much, but it really was just getting in my way too much here.
But I think too, looking at this, if you're saying, you're spending 5 hours total basically in this car, you want it to look nice. Like
Yeah.
I think in this you want it to look as good as it can.
Yeah.
If that's one of the main things you're going to be doing, because also if you're sitting around listening to conversations, the only other thing you can do is kind of look at the environment. So yeah, I think it does kind of surprise me that you say that it doesn't look like the best it could on Quest, because to me this doesn't look super. I mean, I'm sure it's just because it's like an indie studio, and that's there's challenges with that. But it's again something interesting that we'll come back to with VVR2 is that has such expansive, and I would say not the same, but similar kind of that cartoony art style that we kind of know Quest can kind of hone in on. So it's interesting that obviously Tentacles is way more experienced, like way more, I'm sure, with VR than these guys are. But and that makes a huge difference. But I am surprised that it doesn't kind of look exactly the same as the trailer, because I would like to think that it could actually, handle that if maybe, it's a different studio with a bit more experience, maybe, or just that kind of thing. That I'm sure it's something like that.
It really does strike you as one of those projects that got ported like all around the shop after its initial platform, right? And the thing is, it does, like you said, it has this lovely cartoonish sheen to it, but that just gets really, really lost on Quest. And the character models. I had a really great interview with the Alchemy Labs guys doing Cosmonious High the other day, and they said, the thing about like meeting characters in VR is if you've gone through traditional game animation techniques, it just feels like you're meeting an animatronic, not a real person. And that's really the case here. Like they're just sitting around, looking around as they're driving.
Hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, I can see that.
And never making eye contact with you. Yeah.
What sticks out to me is like I remember in Half-Life Alyx when I walked into the room with Russell, and I think he follows you around the room no matter where you walk. But even without that, the animations felt so much more fluid, because I'm presuming it's motion capture. But I remember that being like really shocked by that and being like, wow, this feels very different to like even other games where I've walked around on a flat screen and they followed you, wherever you walk. But yeah, I can see totally the difference between like a game that just has kind of those animations and something that's like very much centered around interacting with you in a space. It's the same kind of thing we've been talking about, of like the difference between standing around watching someone and standing around doing things with things happening around you,
Yeah, because I mean, like, if you had like, I know this is a big ask, but like you had like a Game Boy with like a small platformer inside of it or something to play in the car.
Yeah,
that's something where you could be tuning into this conversation, but you could be doing something at the same time. Oh, and to your point about Alex, is Valve have said, like any character interaction in that game, they keep like to like a minute or something maximum.
Yeah,
just because if you keep it brief and magical and highly performed, like Russell is at the start of the game, you're going to be looking and you're going to be paying attention. Sure, you might like try and like poke him in the head or something, but it's not going to be half an hour of you just getting like so insanely bored that you're just trying anything to try and move the conversation on or something like that.
And it's interesting that you say that too about the Game Boy thing, because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of restless whenever I'm playing a game where someone's talking. If it goes on for a bit, I start like picking up things in the environment chucking them around. Like I just start playing around with whatever you can kind of do in the game. Whereas if in this game you're saying it's just a pointer and you can't even pick the things up, and like for me that would be like, I don't know, maybe I'm just especially restless, but like if I couldn't pick things up, I always find something to do. Even when I was playing VVR2 and there's these kind of long, dialogue bits, I was kind of in the hub picking up stuff, chucking it around in the low gravity thing and playing around just to kind of, occupy yourself. So yeah, I can see how that pointer kind of mechanic. It's a shame because I remember when this was announced, and we were going to do a show, I think, and talk about it. And I watched the trailer, I read the thing. I was like, oh, this looks really cool. I wouldn't mind actually checking this out. So it's a shame that it's kind of, I guess, hindered by the stuff you've talked about.
It would have been a good Gear VR game, but
not. It makes me think of like, I don't feel like people have ever really said this, but it feels like how a bit like you said, you think it's one of those games that works well in VR, and it reminds me of like, you would kind of think that like there'd be a Telltale game would almost work well in VR, like modified, but then you kind of go, actually, probably not. It's a lot of like walking and like just picking things and being stationary, but it seems at first glance almost like there'd be a kind of, it's very cinematic. I can kind of experience it, but yeah.
Yeah, I want to say this now.
Yes,
it just doesn't.
Yeah,
I understand that
when we can actually talk,
solving that. Yeah,
when we can actually talk and have conversations where it's not telling us, or we can speak the words, and like I think that'll be a huge difference. Like I remember there was that GPT-3 demo a while back that's on one of our channels where they were like talking to NPCs, and NPCs were like AI generating responses back, and I was like, that's pretty. That's the kind of thing that would, I think, revolutionize this, or like a Telltale game or something that's a whole different level of, storytelling unlocked. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to second kind of game to review / talk about for the week, although we're kind of doing this for the second time. You've been back to VVR2 a couple of weeks ago, probably getting on for a month ago now. This released. You were pretty intrigued by some of the narrative hints in the story, where it might be going with its ideas on the metaverse. Of course, it's developed by Tentaclaws, who we know for doing obviously the first game, and then like things like the Under Presents and really, really interesting storytelling techniques in VR. So I think everyone had high hopes for something pretty cool, but it was technically constrained. And I think even now, going back to the promised patches, you're still a bit underwhelmed by it, right?
Yeah, and I should know when we say technically constrained, it's very much, it performs well. It plays like a dream. But in terms of like frame rate and that kind of thing. However, there are still lots of bugs, and I do think, to Tentaclaws' credit, like they did definitely improve it. There was that kind of 2-week post-launch patch that I kind of waited for, went back to, definitely has improved. But it's just that it to me, I think I said in the review, it doesn't feel like anything has gone away entirely. It just feels like it happens maybe a little bit less, or like there are some instances where specific things have been fixed, and you can kind of tell it's like happening less, but the bugs are still pretty intrusive. Like if they'd been a little bit worse, it would have been like, this was, to me, it was very close to being like, this is an avoid because the bugs are almost that bad. Not to kind of jump straight into the bugs, because there are good things about this, but to go over like some of the bugs, stuff like going to quest home and then returning to the game like even 10 seconds later and having a black screen and then having to restart and losing progress. Or really frustratingly, there was a lot of audio bugs, which got better again after the patch. Stuff like spatial audio being completely off, like people standing here next to me and sounding like they're in a different room, or people who are literally in a different room and I can hear them like they're next to me and can't hear what the actual person I'm meant to be talking to is saying. Events just not starting, having to restart things, stuff like that. And it's all stuff that you can manage and deal with. But there's almost just enough of it that it's like, it made the ending really difficult for me to kind of get through. But on the other side of it, there's a lot of stuff that's really admirable and cool about it. This is the kind of problem, and I think this is why I fell in that, no label, read the review, see what you think. Because to me, there's very structured kind of things. There's very clear areas that are done well and very clear areas that are difficult. And one of the things that I said the first time we talked about this was that the mech system you basically sit inside that Chaz mech the whole time. It's like a little a fisherman's tail like kind of hub where everything is bigger outside the mech and you're in the mech. You move it all with environmental controls. It's like left and right turning, a throttle, and jumping. Then you can also go like room scale and embody the mech and use this like vacuum gun, these boxing hands, which you've seen in the trailer. So you've got like two ways to play, and they've kind of integrated motion. Like comfort options are not even, you don't need to go to a menu. It's just part of the game. You're looking through the mech eye, which is essentially vignette. You're going into room scale and teleporting. There are situations where you'll have to do one or the other, but generally you can kind of choose, and you're just kind of, the game is designed in a way where you can just do what you want and you won't even notice that you're playing a certain way. You know, someone who maybe has never played VR before, if you ran through the basics of this, they'd just start doing what they felt comfortable doing because you can just choose, which I think is like, for me, that is absolutely gold standard, like how every game should consider what they're doing. Even if it's not the same system, it's like, oh, they've put thought into not having the person have to even go into a menu to think about this. You know, they don't have to know what vignetting is or what that does, which I think is great. That's like fantastic. I think the environments look stunning and they're huge, and it's a lot of them on Quest. It really surprises me. The draw distance can be quite long. Things do pop in, but like they are so varied too and visually stunning. The flip side to that is that they're more open in kind of design than the first game. They'll often like put you in a big area. It's split into chapters. Often a chapter will start in an area. Sometimes it's more linear, like walk through a building. Other times it's a bit like this, where you're like in an area and it's like, we've got to go see this person or whatever. And this is where the kind of prioritizing immersion, I think, falls apart a bit, because similar to the motion control kind of concept of like motion comfort features, like concept of we're letting the player do this without thinking about it. There's no objective markers. There's no like, there is a quest log in the mech at the back, but it's very like, it's like they've drawn stuff on a whiteboard. So it's not really like very definitive or clear, but everything is delivered through dialogue and the characters being like, oh, we have to go over this thing, or we were going to go see blah, blah. Often it's like a character name who I can't remember what character that was from like 3 chapters ago, stuff like that. I just wanted like a little marker being like, it's this direction or it's over here. I just feel like it's missing that. And I feel like that's too far on the like immersion kind of prioritization. So as a result, you often feel kind of confused about where to go. Often the audio bugs would get in the way of me figuring out where to go because I didn't hear something that someone said or 2 people were talking at once. It starts to kind of compound in that way. And that became a frustration of like constantly being like, where do I go? What if I missed something? Is something wrong? Is there a bug? But like visually, it looks amazing, I think, and there's some great concepts. I think the plot also falls flat compared to the first one. I think the reason the first one was so cool was that it kind of, they're trying to do this similar thing to the first one and taking like a concept and a technology that's emerging and is kind of the almost, you know, technology or buzzword of the moment, and kind of dissecting it and satirizing it and forming a kind of fictional plot around it. But the first one I think worked because it was very much like a thing you were literally using VR to play the game, and it's making commentary in VR, and you have the technology in your hands. Whereas the metaverse is just, it doesn't really exist yet. All that they're kind of satirizing is the already kind of amusing concepts we have of what this is, which I think will be ultimately, I think everyone knows, will be very different from whatever the metaverse, whatever form it takes. So it's kind of like, it feels like it's almost a bit too early in that it's kind of like, there's not really a metaverse for it to make any smart commentary on. So it as a result, it just goes more and more into like Tender Claus's surreal kind of crazy zany humor and kind of concepts. And I think the combination of that and the fact that it's not really something as like tenable and real as virtual reality headsets were for the first one, it just starts to feel like a bit ridiculous, I think. And it's like stuff just happens and you kind of go, why is this? There's a point in maybe like 3/4 of the way through. This is only like, I wouldn't even say it's a spoiler. It's just something that happens. You go on like this river ride that's a bit reminiscent of like the Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder kind of, it's like a metaverse version of that. And it's kind of cool with lots of things happening, but you're also like, there's no connection with this with anything else. It's just this river ride that you go on and you defeat a few enemies and the crazy things happen, and you're just kind of like, I've been watching crazy things happen for 3 quarters now. Like, it's like it starts to wear off. There's another point where the Gavin in the mech, the guy who's aboard the mech with you, just breaks out into song for 2 minutes. I believe he reprises the song on the river. It's just kind of like, I don't know, stuff just happens because it feels like they're like, what's the metaverse? Anything can happen. And you're like, I don't know. I was looking for something a bit deeper than that, given the first game, because I feel like the first game did make me consider the technology. Like, I was like, oh, this is making me actually think about the implications of this. Whereas this doesn't really make me think about the implications of the metaverse. It's just kind of feels a bit crazy. I don't know. But like, there is good stuff about the game. It's such a hard one. It was so hard to kind of review.
It seems like it needs like a script doctor, right? Like someone to come in and just be like, these are great ideas, but come on. Like you said, like it's 3/4 of the way through, it's purported to be like a 10-hour experience.
It's like 20.
It goes back to the hitchhiker thing. It just, like, VR storytelling is just not going to work this way.
Yeah.
This seems like maybe the complete experience could have been really, really good if you did it episodically, and we were getting like an hour
perhaps
every 6 months or something.
The only suggestion of an episodic release that I feel like I would agree with. I feel like this could have done that well. Yeah, totally. I've not even thought about that, but yeah, I think you've spot on there. Like small bites of it released over time in a smaller overall package. I think, yeah.
Then you keep the wonder, you keep the intrigue, because every time you're not like, slogging for a quest, you're jumping back in for 60 minutes to be like, okay, what's new? What crazy ideas have you got?
And
for me this time?
there's new mechanics, right? Like you go, this second episode has all of a sudden, because they do introduce all of this new stuff. That's the other thing I haven't really touched on, is like there are so many mechanics in this, and it's so impressive because all of them do actually work. Like, it's not a case of they pay homage to so many VR games and there's so many different, almost like mini game elements in it. And all of them are kind of fun to do. And there's so many. It's not like often the case where they put a lot of stuff in, you go, oh, a lot of this just feels kind of vapid or like half done. Whereas this feels like everything is kind of rounded out. There's like a enemy boxing game or shooting game where you shoot little security drones. There's a Beat Saber clone. There's a headset in the bottom of the mech you can get into and fly around like like it's Ultra Wings and start shooting stuff, There's so many different interesting games in this that you go, if it had been something like that where you go, oh, and this episode has a little bit of this in it, a little bit of that, something else new, I think that would have been really cool. But yeah, I think it could have just been like shortened / like script doctored / I don't know. And just, I think, I don't know why, I feel like it was rushed out. I don't know whether that was like a thing of Meta being like, it has to be out by this date, or we've got this release window for you. Take it, or the next one's in however long. I don't know what happened there, but the bugs really, I think, just hinder it. And I think kind of I think part of the thing we were saying before is like standing around talking to players. They've tried to make that, I can see they've tried to fix that problem by like having characters walk somewhere. So like they'll be like, oh, we need to go to this part of the mech, like, and you do like a walk and talk with them as they go there. And you can go, okay, I think this is them trying to be like, we don't want to stand in one place. But then I had characters like walk into a wall, or I had, the audio stuff up, or like it actually, that's the one thing where the bugs are like actually ruining that kind of attempt to fix that problem of just standing around talking. There's still a lot of standing around talking. Don't get me wrong. If you know in previous Tender Claws games, like the original and other games, you kind of will have someone monologue at you. There's a lot of monologues here. There's a lot of talking shoes, talking bananas, talking bartenders, everything. There's a lot of talking. And some of it's good, but yeah.
The other thing about like what you're saying about it being rushed out is just, why are we doing this so often? And we'll talk about this again in a second, actually. Why are we so often saying, oh, this cool surprise sequel that you never expected is happening and it's out next week? Why is no one saying, oh my God, VVR2 is a real thing and we've got a campaign for the next 6 months to build up reasons why you should be excited. Have it on like this broad landscape of what's coming to VR in 2022.
And there's enough to talk about in this game too. Like,
Exactly.
You have enough to say over a 6-month campaign. You're like, there's this mechanic, there's this mechanic, there's this world, there's this thing. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
and prepare people for it a bit more.
Yeah,
Make sure you're getting like feedback from what people are seeing from all of those drops, and just have like, this is just a footnote at the end of the day, because it just
yeah.
releases out of the blue. It's got however many weeks at the top of new releases before it just gets lost in whatever else is on the Quest store, and then we're just back to
I
it.
totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I
it's
had looked actually, like when I went back to play it again, I looked on like Reddit and stuff just to try and find what other people were saying to see like if other people had buggy experiences, if people were enjoying it, just to get a idea. And there wasn't a lot to find because I feel like it just was announced, came out really quickly. Then there was kind of us and the other sites that were like, oh, it's kind of buggy. We'll see what happens. I did see some stuff on like Reddit posts at the time also being like, it's kind of air or it's buggy or whatever. And then I feel like that was kind of it. I've not seen much people on Twitter, Reddit, all kind of, there's not been much talk about it. I think because it just, as you said, it was announced, it happened, and now it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I think the marketing kind of non-existent almost marketing campaign is really strange too, given it's such a big deal because the first one was seemingly quite popular and also well regarded, I think. So
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So yeah, what could have been, unfortunately. But
yeah.
speaking of games that are coming out surprisingly soon, and really could have done with a bit more of a heads up. What am I doing? I'm finding a video. 1 second.
No,
I'm just gonna say it. Master Book 2 is coming March 31st to PSVR, which, hooray!
yeah.
I would have really
Just
liked to have known this earlier.
yeah.
But this is actually really good news. I got a 10-minute, not a hands-on demo, but like eyes-on gameplay walkthrough earlier in the week of this, and I gotta say, feeling pretty confident about this one. Although, again, could all go wrong
Yeah.
in the last mile there. But what I was seeing was very much like both an expansion and evolution of what we got in the first game. So obviously,
Mm,
if you've played Moss 1, you'll know it's like a third-person action adventure game where you control a small mouse called Quill. But it was one of the first games to capitalize on that idea that although you're playing a character from third person, you, the player, are a presence in the world too. You're seeing in the trailer like the ghostly form that you take on, and you can reach into the world if you're on PSVR with the DualShock 4 tracking to interact in different ways with Quill and the level, and it just created a really, really cool special bond that I think we then saw really got taken to another level in Astrobot. And I think my fear with this was always going to be that, Astrobot was just so much of a step forward from Moss, as much as I enjoyed Moss, that this wouldn't manage to keep up. But from what I saw in this demo, I feel like they're probably going to put it off. So this is looking to be a much more kind of interactive sequel, in that the player has new abilities, like they can reach into the world and grab a vine and make a bridge,
yeah.
or they can
Yeah.
highlight a wall and reveal something that Quill will be able to climb. The main thing that really struck me as really, really cool was this new hammer weapon, which again you see in the trailer. And initially you look at that and you think, okay, cool, she has a new hammer. That's going to mean slower, heavier attacks like it would in any game. And yes, that's there. But there's also a special ability where she makes this like phantom mirror version of the hammer. Then you can control her to walk away from the hammer, and you can reach in and throw the hammer down yourself.
Yeah, that's
And it
cool.
gives, yeah, it's really cool because it gives combat this kind of tactical edge
Yeah.
of you can get Quill to safety, almost more like she's a cooperative partner than she is a playable character in some
Mhm.
ways. And then you can also do puzzles with it as well.
Yeah.
So that was cool. My one fear with it would be that it's releasing at a very transitional time for VR. A
Yeah. I'm very
PSVR. It's
surprised that it's
yeah. I
this
wish
period.
there's a big part of me that wishes they had kind of committed to leaving PSVR 1 behind, because
Yeah.
obviously the thing about being on PSVR 1 and especially releasing on PSVR 1 is that you still have to design the game around only one point of tracked
Is it
interaction.
is it still just DualShock, or is it using
Yeah.
Move? Do you have the option
It's
for Move?
still just
controllers?
the DualShock.
So
Because
no
you
Move
can't
controllers.
move Quill with the moves.
Oh, of course.
at
I always
all,
forget
so-
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
So that, I mean, I don't think it's going to be too big of a problem, but there's definitely more gameplay opportunities to look at from knowing everyone that plays the game has 2 motion controllers and building on
Yeah.
top of that. I'm sure it's going to come to other platforms, but because
Yeah.
of that starting point, you're not going to see anything too radically different. However, I'm pretty confident this one's going to be a home run. You know, everyone loves the first Moss. It was such a lovely, short, reassuring little game to get at a time where there wasn't much of that going around in VR. And now it feels like they're stepping it up and doing a big full experience. And I'll have more from an interview with Polyarc later in the week, more on what we learned about the demo on the website, but you can read my hands-on today. This goes up after the embargo. And yeah, March 31st, something big to look forward to finally.
It's interesting because I played when I got my Quest, or my Quest 1 around just a little bit after Quest 1 launch. I played some of this, I think it was around then, on Quest. And I remember I'd never finished it or anything. I played maybe like, I don't know, an hour or two, maybe a bit more. But I remember from even what I played then thinking, kind of being able to tell that knowing it had come from PSVR and having the one controller and wanting to do more with my hands. Because there was the few bits, I think, from memory, it's like you reach out and turn something and something to do with a bridge or like some kind of those little bits of interactivity. And I felt like I remember doing that and being like, oh, that's cool. Because I remember starting it being like, oh, so I'm actually just going to be almost playing a platformer, just in VR. And then those little bits where you're reaching out and doing things. I was like, oh, that's the interesting part that I'm enjoying from this. So I feel like having more of that will be interesting. But then again, it's still designed for a DualShock controller, so I don't know.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting. It surprises me that there's not even support for. I guess again they can't do the moving thing. Part of me just goes they should just have support for both. But yeah, I guess there's no way to move.
It's one of those things where I think
with
it's
the
going to be
moves.
okay for this game because if you played an hour of Moss, you played half of Moss. It was really really short.
Right.
So there's still it still has to like pass the hurdle of actually making a full game, and there was still so much potential untapped from the first game that I think they can check out.
And it feels like that kind of thing too, where they could release it on Quest and be like, and on Quest it has this extra 2-hour DLC with new stuff in it. It's one of those.
That's true.
Yeah, I feel like that could be a big thing too. Or, Moss chapter or book 2.5. Yeah, like do a Lion King 2.5 or a Lion King 1.5. Just have a little Timon and Pumbaa's perspective kind of thing going on.
Or a year from now, like again, like PSVR 2 and the haptic triggers and everything like that. That's going to open up new gameplay. So there is an element of, oh man, if only you could have just ditched this and then.
I mean, this has got
so many more ideas.
This is surely designed for like PSVR 2 in mind, and they're just kind of putting it out on PSVR 1 because
that's what I
release it now. You would assume, like, there's no way, given that because the first one was PSVR exclusive for a while. Was it? Or
yeah,
did it launch on PSVR?
I'd probably say like to the tune of like 6, maybe 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so given that happened, and this one is also exclusive for presumably a few months or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think that they've got PSVR 2 in mind as well. Like that, I don't know. That I would be very surprised if not. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have a full review in 2 weeks, hopefully, right here.
Yeah.
It's releasing on the same day as Cosmonious High because yet again everyone's like, oh, nothing's happening in VR on the same day.
Yeah.
Which Cosmonious High meanwhile is coming to Quest and PC, and I've played the first half an hour of that. We've got an exclusive Powers trailer that went up today as well, which you should definitely check out.
Tell me about this game, Jamie, because I'm I wouldn't say I'm intrigued, to be honest. I would say I look at it, I'm like,
Really?
oh, it looks all right. I don't know.
I think we're in this really
I,
interesting place with Alchemy Labs. I feel
mm,
like I played half an hour of it, and I was thinking, this is cool. I'm getting the same vibes of Vacation Simulator. Of I'm playing a lot of
yeah,
fun mini games. There's definitely a lot of work gone into fun interactions and everything like that. I just don't know if I care about the context enough for this
yeah.
to be. I hate to be like, oh, I want grit and I want space marines and
No, but
soldiers
I
and stuff like that. But
something
I
about
also
this, I'm
don't
just
want to
kind
be
of like,
in the. So
yeah.
here's my
But
thing.
are we just two grumpy old men? Like,
Well,
like the
basically, yeah.
kids might just love this. Like, I don't know, maybe
I want Matt
the
Reeves Batman, not Adam
yeah,
West Batman.
yeah,
Um, the thing is, right? So I played it and I totally got that from it. Like I played half an hour of spraying water out my hand, shooting ice
yeah,
out my hands. You're the new student in a alien high school, and you get special powers based on certain situations that you can then use throughout the rest of the game. So on the screen now,
mm,
we're seeing like the ability to resize objects. There's also like fire and telekinesis and everything like that. And if you played Vacation Simulator, you'll know that like that was just basically an assortment of mini games. And this is
yeah,
kind of the same thing of you go to class, you get different objectives in classes. They often require you to use your powers in different ways. And in that first half an hour, I thought, oh man, this is I I can see all the new work that Alchemy has done here. I think it's very impressive work. I don't think there's any context to actually make the gameplay that interesting. Then I sat down with Andrew and Devon from the founders and kind of leaders of Alchemy, and they were talking me through it, and they were like, some of the things you're probably not realizing early on in the game is like, if you have the water power in one hand and you have the ice power in another hand, you can actually combine them to like shoot ice cubes. But also there's like chemical properties in the chemistry lab where you could make something edible. And if you have that with the water power and shoot the ice cubes, you're making edible ice cubes, and everyone suddenly
all
starts to try and
right,
like eat everything in the
all
room and stuff
right.
like that. Or what was the other thing?
That's
Oh,
kind of the thing
and
I was going to ask. Because I was looking at this and you saying, you can do this and that. And I kind of go, but is it limited? Like the resize thing, I saw that. I'm like, if you give me resize hands, I want to resize everything in the
well,
room.
exactly. That's going to be the
Like,
test, right? And I haven't
yeah,
got to that yet, but
yeah,
the other thing is they've done like we were talking about those animations, and I mentioned that quote from them that like it can feel like meeting characters in VR. It's
yep,
kind of like animatronics. Here they said they've done a lot of kind of interesting like puppetry work of like with lines of dialogue, trying to work out how that would actually look if a character was always trying to make eye contact with a player and be direct and involved. But then
mm,
also there's kind of like a level of performance art to it as well. So Devin was telling me that like one of the characters is in the chemistry class and goes to fill up a beaker, but at the same time he like threw something at her and she caught it and looked at it while she was still filling up the beaker and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it's interesting because it's one of those things where that doesn't actually sound that like impressive from a gameplay perspective, but when you realize all the underlying systems that have gone into making that a real and
totally,
believable thing, that's actually
yeah,
where the intrigue starts to come in, right? So they said to me that the demo ends after the first two lessons, and then you step out into a wider school hall, which is where the game's meant to really open up. And I think it's important to be armed with that knowledge that every power you get, you're beyond just what the game's asking you to do. You should be experimenting and turning the world into a playground and trying to
yeah,
test its limits and see the fun,
yeah,
because that might be where the strength of the game really
mm,
lies. And I do hope that's the case, because I think Alchemy does incredibly interesting, great work in contexts that I'm often not that interested
yeah.
in.
No, it's true. It's, I mean, and then
So
they made walking around a desk job like
yeah,
fun. Like
yeah,
I remember playing jobs. I haven't played Vacation Simulator, but I remember playing Job Simulator, Simulator Moss when I first got my Quest, and I was kind of trying all the big ones at the time. And I've put a few people in Job Simulator, and it's like that's the kind of thing where that shouldn't be fun, but it is, because it's like literally putting floppy disks in computers like it's the 90s.
yeah.
And you go, this was literally a like. And I remember talking to people about it, being like, yeah, there's this desk simulator, job. You can like put the floppy disk, eat donuts, like chuck things around. And they're like, so you just like it's almost weird to explain to someone because the
Yeah.
context sounds really boring. It's like it's literally what people describe as like, oh, I've got to go to my desk job. How boring. And you're doing it's fun things in like, almost uninteresting contexts. Similar to the other stuff. I feel like that's a lot of VR too, being in a kitchen, working. It's weird how a lot of like what people complain is like work in the real world and like ends up getting into like a VR game is like, oh, when you do it in VR, this can be really fun because you can do all these different things and muck around with it.
And
it'll be interesting. It's an interesting one, I think.
they're kind of stubborn in that way, right? Of like,
Yeah.
everyone else is like just running at this idea of what we want is fast-paced shooters and smooth locomotion and big RPGs with inventory systems and everything else
And
like
like
that.
anything and anywhere. It's like amazing environments and like
and
you can do anything.
Alchemy is kind of like this almost last bastion of being like, whoa, slow down, everyone.
Yeah.
The technology is
Interactions
really
are
not
fun.
there yet. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We should be way more focused. Like they would be interested in this room, this small four-walled room we've got,
Totally.
and what fun you could have in here, more than putting you in like Elden Ring,
looking at
for
a
example.
waterfall and a jungle and
Yeah,
seeing a huge vista of and then giving you a gun.
yeah, and there's power to that for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm really rooting for Cosmonious because I always just notice how far back my avatar makes me lean. I feel like some sort of mob boss being like, yeah, you
got the
10
you got the
grand.
like the
I really have to sit forward, don't I? Anyway, yeah. So again, March 31st, big week for VR, big day for VR. We'll see how that goes.
on competing platforms too. Interestingly, it's got a big release on either platform.
And again, you kind of hope Cosmonious ends up on PSVR too, but that's all to see.
Yeah.
Final thing of the day, and normally we do news first and then go into the impressions, but we've got all the impressions out of the way because we had a backlog. I thought this was an interesting one to talk about. Zenith has been on sale for nearly 2 months now. Obviously, huge launch. Everyone in VR talking about it, very, very excited about it. Still, Harry,
the king.
It did not dethrone Beat Saber,
the king,
in the monthly PlayStation Store charts. Beat Saber is getting on for nearly 2 years at the top of the PlayStation.
Nothing will ever top it. When do you? Okay. This is we're gonna put this into like everyone remember this moment. When do you think Beat Saber will be like not in? Let's say the top 3. It drops to like 4. When on PSVR does it get to like 4?
Never.
Pick a random month.
It's done.
Never.
It's done.
Never.
It's over. The only chance they have now is to restart with PSVR 2 and have something.
I guess okay, maybe it could go to like 2 if like I don't know. But do you think this would like? I'm just gonna say if Moss 2 is like I don't know a huge success, but I can't see Moss being bigger than this. This was this was huge on every platform. Yeah. So you go, well, yeah, I guess it is. It's not till we get Alex on PSVR 2, hopefully, maybe. That's maybe the only thing
the thing is, there's just this. I mean, the other games that beat it, that sold more than Zenith in February on the PlayStation Store digital sales, were Job Simulator and Superhot. And it's just,
I don't get this. This is so confusing to me. The Job Simulator thing. That's the one I get it. I guess kind of, but also
they said to me it still sells incredibly well. And
so, but who is buying? Like, who hasn't bought this? That is buying it enough to, like, people aren't really like. Yeah. It's almost hard to buy a PSVR headset, right? Because they're kind of like non-existent. Like, they're still in production, right? I don't know. It's a weird kind of. Sometimes you can get them, sometimes you can't. I think it's worse for me because I'm in Australia, but
well, it's pretty bad
weird.
Everywhere.
It's weird though. Like, it's weird that you would think that everyone who has a PSVR headset would have bought both Beat Saber and Job Simulator. And what was the other one? The third one? Yeah. Like, who hasn't? I don't understand. Is it just there's not many sales at all on PSVR? So, like, is that it? Maybe
that's got to be it, isn't it? Like, I think that.
Yeah, it's got to be. There's just not many. So it's like the bare minimum of.
It's the stuff.
And I guess it's kind of like yeah. I guess because people also too must regard PSVR as like a iToy or a gimmick of their PlayStation, right? Where it's like maybe they boot it up after not having played anything for 2 years because they're vaguely. They see something about Quest 2 and like, oh, I'll plug the PSVR back in. They're like, oh, I haven't tried Beat Saber. I guess I'll try that this time. And then like never play it again for like, 6 months, maybe. This is bizarre. The more, I didn't think much of this, but the more, now you brought up, the more I think about it, it is kind of weird.
The thing that will be really interesting, and no one's really asking this yet, but this is going to be the real test of how the future looks. Is Facebook going to port Beat Saber to PSVR 2? I can see it going either way. They've never said anything about supporting future platforms, but also it's the biggest thing in VR.
Do we know if you can play PSVR titles on PSVR 2? If they said no, you can't, or
no, they haven't said anything yet. But it's doubtful.
Yeah, I guess so, because it's kind of like a whole different thing, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one too. Also, my other thought similar to that is, and this is something I'll get into in the future, because I am going to do like a big re-review of Beat Saber for like the modern kind of times. But I am of the opinion that which is probably controversial, that they should make a Beat Saber 2, and just like overhaul it visually. The biggest, weirdly, I don't know if you remember these games, but the analogy for me is like, you ever play Tap Tap Revenge? Remember that game on mobile?
Yeah.
You would like tap the little like beats. Like
this is sparking something in the old noggin.
Yeah, well, that had like several iterations of it, and it was like literally the same game every time as a rhythm game on phones. But every time the new Tap Tap came out, it was like, ooh, yeah, cool. Like it looks a bit better. It's got different song selection. I believe, I'm not sure if it worked that way, but I think it Beat Saber, they'd let you take everything over, all your scores and existing DLC, and you can play it all. But it's like, and I think like, there should be Beat Saber 2. Everyone who gets a Quest should just get that for free because they're going to pay for DLC. And then I would go, okay, if that happens, does that get put on PSVR 2? I would hope so. But I could also see a world where they go, ooh, PSVR 2 gets like backwards compatible Beat Saber 1, but doesn't get the fancy new Beat Saber 2. Yeah. I don't know. Interesting. But
it's in the metaverse now.
Yeah. But I guess, there's no way that anything's going to top, I guess, Beat Saber now that the Zenith opportunity has come and gone. Was it? I mean,
No.
maybe. So Zenith was number 4.
5.
What was 4?
Oh, I think Creed sold really well last month. It must have been a sale.
Creed?
Yeah, it's depressing, man. But I like weird. Creed, but come on.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it there.
Yeah.
It's been 2 weeks. There's plenty more we could talk about, but we should save some for next week for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in today, everyone. The VR Gamescast normally goes live every Thursday. We're back. We're going to keep the schedule, we promise. If you like this, please, of course, head over to UploadVR.com. Read our latest reviews. Everything we've talked about today is on the website as well. Monday, Ian and Heaney are back with their tech-focused podcast, which is beyond me.
Tech.
And tech. Who needs tech?
Imagine that.
Imagine a world without tech.
Yeah, no. Only games.
Yeah. So, thanks so much for being here, guys. And we'll see you next week. Say goodbye, Harry. Say goodbye now.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Go buy Beat Saber on PSVR. Make sure it stays at number 1. It needs your help.
Ignore this
See
man.
You later. No, yeah.
See ya.
See ya.